the publisher of Irish Breakdown. Nobody knows the Irish better than this man right here. Former coach, player, Bryan Driskell, joining us live from Miami. What's happening, bro?
Enjoying this warm weather. I'm so sad I'm not in the 20-degree weather of Indiana. I just can't tell you how heartbroken I am about that.
Dude, you escaped. So there you are. I mean, even
they
in
tried
Texas,
to keep me in. They canceled my flight and everything on Monday, so they tried to keep me in Indiana, but we got out.
We got out, baby. And how is it down there? I mean, can you give a little scene set what you've witnessed so far?
It's beautiful. I mean, there's a lot of Penn State fans, a lot of Notre Dame fans. You know, it's not real hot. It's really nice, 60-degree weather, just beautiful, beautiful time of the year, and a big game and a historic bowl game against two blue bloods that haven't played each other in a long time. So, I mean, what's better than this, right? Who's got it better than us? We get to talk about stuff like this in the middle of January.
No, dude, you're exactly right. And you've been covering, I mean, around the Irish forever, but covering them for over a decade, well over a decade. What is your level of anticipation for this matchup? Long time coming for fans. I imagine it's even longer for somebody like you.
Well, yeah, because the big thing the big battle that I had prior to Marcus Freeman being hired was, could Notre Dame get back on top again? You know, and there was all these excuses to why, and there was all these things, and I never bought it, Pete. There was always like, top athletes don't want to go to school. Says who? I mean, I watched Myron Rolle become a brain surgeon, and still play at Florida State, right? Reggie Bush was an over 3.0 student. It was more about people want to play, they want to be a champion, right? They want to go to the NFL. They want to be a high draft pick. They want to do all these things. And there's no evidence that tells me that kids don't want to do that if you give them a reason why you want to do it. I mean, there was talk of Notre Dame is fading, and then Lou Holtz comes along and wins a championship, and Notre Dame has 3 straight #1 recruiting classes, and they're getting kids from all over the country. And I just never bought that excuse that you had to shop down a different aisle, that Notre Dame couldn't get to this point in time, that Northern football couldn't kind of get back to some of its dominance of the past. And we're seeing that. And it really comes down to, obviously the NIL era has helped to a degree, but I mean, these are two teams in Penn State and Notre Dame that are primarily homegrown teams. The two of them combined, of their 22 starters, only 7 of them are portal guys, and so these are still teams primarily built through high school recruiting and development. And it just kind of goes to show that with all the changes coming along, that's still the best way to build a team. And actually 3 of the 4 teams are that way, because Ohio State has some big name transfers, but they're also still primarily built, the majority of their roster, through kids that they recruited at the high school level. And I always felt Notre Dame was capable of being on the stage and competing and being as good as Georgia and Ohio State and those teams. And now they're getting to the point where they've got opportunities to prove that. And still a lot of work to be done, but I think the win last week showed a lot of people that, that Notre Dame can play at that level and compete with the top teams, which is something they hadn't done in a long time.
You said a little more work to be done, but a lot of work has gotten done to get to this point. What don't people know? Again, what don't people know about Marcus Freeman that makes him special? Because you see him from afar, he's very likable, but why is he so good?
Well, he's very likable because he's genuine, right? And one of the quote unquote criticisms that people have of him is he's too honest in press conferences, and sometimes you're just like, hey man, maybe you don't tell people that. But the other thing about him is, let's not forget, this is a former starting middle linebacker under Jim Tressel at Ohio State. He is off the field, a very nice, a very calm, a very generous, a very giving guy. But you see him at practice, you see him on the sidelines, you see the former middle linebacker that had over 100 tackles for a Jim Tressel team back in the day. He's very intense. He's very passionate. But look, young people can see through a lot of the fluff, a lot of the BS, a lot of the stuff that's just not real. And whether you like him or not, that what Marcus Freeman is telling you is it's genuine, and kids want to play for that. Want to play for someone who's like, I want you to challenge me. I want you to hold me accountable. I want you to push me. I want you to demand my best. And I may not at the moment want that, but I do want that. And that's what he does. He's hired coaches that believe in the same thing. And these kids play hard for him. But at the same time, it's also, these aren't like what we would consider quote unquote 3-star recruits that are try-hard guys. These are really talented athletes and really talented football players that are there too. And what we're seeing from this coaching staff and led by Marcus Freeman is they're much more able to get the best out of this team on a consistent basis than we've seen in the past. But at the same time, you have to ask yourself, how much of that was because of the Northern Illinois loss? You now have this talking point of, hey, if you don't listen to me, this could happen again. You know what I mean? And I think something like that helps as well.
What changed about the team? You mentioned that Northern Illinois loss. I was calling a game at North Texas that day, and I remember looking. I was in the TV booth, and I looked at a screen in the neighboring booth, and I saw Northern Illinois win. And right away, you're just like, wow, like Marcus Freeman might lose his job. Like that's the first thing you think of, right? This is like week 2, and now, I mean, and that's why I'm here and you're there. I mean, like you are on the inside. You knew better than that, but what changed about that team that day? What changed?
There were plenty of people that cover and follow Notre Dame that felt the same way. I mean, you can't lose to Marshall and Stanford and Northern Illinois, but really, Pete, what changed that day is that was a talented Notre Dame team. We saw that a week before against Texas A&M. I was a very confident Notre Dame team, but that was also a very immature Notre Dame team, as we found out. And it was a team that, while they had some veterans like Howard Cross and Riley Mills and Xavier Watts, Riley Leonard, this is still a very young team that on offense started at the time 9 players that had freshman or sophomore eligibility. There's several true sophomores and redshirt sophomores and redshirt freshmen playing on defense. And they kind of had this think, well, we beat Texas A&M, so Northern Illinois is no problem. We're just going to roll the ball out and just kind of walk through them and take it for granted. And there's even players talking about that on the Here Come the Irish feature on Peacock. They say, like, look, we just kind of thought it's Northern Illinois. Who's that? And what that loss did is that gave Marcus Freeman and his staff sort of the fuel to say, you can't take anybody for granted. You can't assume anything. You've got to go out there and give your best every week. And then they made some changes structurally to how they prepare. And since then, they've not only won 12 in a row, but they really haven't played many competitive games. I mean, only one of those 12 wins was by single digits, and that required Louisville scoring in the fourth quarter to make it a single-digit game or single-score game. And so they've not only played well, but we're seeing close to the best version of this team for a while. And the other thing, too, Pete, is they play great team football. You know, when the defense struggles against USC, the offense steps up and rips USC up. When the offense is struggling against Georgia, the defense and special teams step up. And that's been true all season. And when they play well in all 3 phases, it's hard for teams to hang with this football team because they do have talent.
If Notre Dame wins tonight, what's the headline? What's the first line of the story? Who performs? What happens?
I mean, I think it's got to be about the trenches, right? I mean, for all the changes in football, Pete, and all the new offenses and air raids and NIL and transfer portal, football is still a game that really stays the same. And that is, at this level, against these type of teams, who wins in the trenches? Who can go out there and on both sides of the lines win that battle? Because these are 2 teams that are constructed in very similar ways. And so if the lines play well, then that's how Riley Leonard has a big day. Right? Like that's how the Notre Dame secondary forces a couple big turnovers because Drew Aller was pressured and he has to force some throws in the coverage. I mean, Notre Dame's not number 1 in the country in forced turnovers by accident, right? They're not just, oh, look, a ball came our way. I mean, like people say in the Georgia game, well, if Georgia doesn't turn it over, you guys realize those were forced turnovers, right? Those weren't like just like the Navy game when Notre Dame played Navy. There was 2 turnovers where they just dropped the ball.
Yeah.
I mean, there was, it's like it just nothing Notre Dame did. They fell on it, but they just dropped the ball. Both of those turnovers against Georgia were forced, and that's primarily what Notre Dame has done. But a lot of it comes down to when they play well in the trenches, this team is hard to beat because then Riley Leonard can really go off and have time to throw. And when they don't, the offense sputters like it did against Georgia. And I don't know that you can just keep, hoping that your special teams gives you a 98-yard kick return and your defense gives you a 13-yard field every week. And I think this Penn State offense is more dangerous than Georgia's was, if we're being honest about it, even if Carson Beck played. And so they're going to have to be at their best, but they're going to need a little bit more help from the offense in this game. And I think that'll be the storyline if Notre Dame comes out with a win.
As far as Love and him coming back and playing, what do you see his impact being tonight?
That's a good question. Notre Dame's been very close to the vest about his health. I mean, I do expect him to play. I do expect him to be a feature back. But the nice thing about Notre Dame is they're not just the Jeremiah Love show on offense. I mean, Jadarian Price has been dynamic. I mean, he's the guy that sparked him against Texas A&M. Jeremiah Love gets hurt in the 3rd quarter against USC. Jadarian Price comes out and rushes for 100 yards in the second half after he went down. And that's what makes this team so dangerous. I mean, they beat Florida State by 49 and Jeremiah Love rushed for 19 yards. They beat Georgia by 13, and I think he was held to less than 20 yards in that game as well. So if he's healthy, then they have a shot to be that dynamic big play offense. If he's not, then you just lean a little bit more heavily on Jadarian Price and a little bit more heavily on Riley Leonard, and you roll. And that's what's made this run game so good this year is you can't just shut down Jeremiah Love and it's like, all right, cool. Like if you shut down Ashton Genty, Boise, no chance to win, right?
Yeah.
If you do that with Notre Dame, it's like, okay, well, Riley Leonard can hurt you like you did against Georgia, or Jadarian Price can go off like he did against Texas A&M and USC, and that's really where you want to be. And that's also something that's different from past Notre Dame teams. If you shut down Will Fuller, okay, Notre Dame's not going to do a whole lot. If you shut down, the run game in 2017, they're not going to beat that many good teams. Now they can just hurt you so many different ways, and that's what the best teams do. That's what Penn State does.
Yeah.
Right? It's okay, you can shut down the run game, but you forgot to cover Tyler Warren. You know what I mean? Or you cover Tyler Warren and lock him down, but you forgot about Nicholas Singleton and Katron Allen. And that's true for Ohio State. That's true for Texas. And that's what gets these teams on this stage.
All right, I got one more for you before I let you go, because I'm sure you got a very busy day. What are you most worried about if you're Marcus Freeman or even if you're Bryan Driskell? Obviously you want to be at the championship game covering it. I mean, it's good for business. It's good for football, good for you. I say it's good for football because I think Notre Dame being involved is good for football. But what are you most fearful about when it comes to Penn State?
It comes back to what we talked about at the beginning, right? It's Penn State is a team that is capable of hurting you in the trenches. And there were some teams this year that you'd watch them say, that's a good football team, but they don't really have a shot at beating Notre Dame because they can't beat Notre Dame in the trenches. I think Indiana's a heck of a football team, but I said they can't beat Notre Dame in the trenches for 4 quarters on both sides of the ball. They just can't do it. Northern Illinois did. I mean, you go back and watch that game. At the end of the day, there's this fluke play and that fluke play. You can talk about all you want, but they whooped Notre Dame up front on both sides of the ball. That's really what it came down to. And since then, nobody's been able to do that. And so Georgia did it on one side of the ball, but Notre Dame's defensive line was even more dominant than Georgia's defensive line was. And with Penn State, they're a team that has the talent to where they can actually win both battles if Notre Dame doesn't play well. And so if Notre Dame doesn't win, you ask about storyline, I think that's going to be the storyline on the opposite side. And they'll talk about Singleton and Allen and Tyler Warren and Drew Aller, but it's going to come down to the Penn State offensive line held the Notre Dame D-line in check and vice versa. On the other, same thing on the other side of the ball. So if they don't win, and it sounds simple and maybe lazy because we keep talking about trench play, but when you look at how those two teams got here, that's really what it boils down to. I mean, why did Michigan beat Washington last year? Trenches. Why did Michigan beat Alabama last year? Trenches. What made Georgia so dominant 21 and 22? They were dominant up front on both sides of the ball. That's still what football is all about.
Yeah, no, if the guys that are in the trenches are not doing their jobs, then the guys who are so wildly talented, right, they're not able to do theirs. They're just not.
Right.
Bryan Driskell, dude, the place to go is Irish Breakdown, and you are the man. I really appreciate you taking the time on a day like today where I know I'm not even going to say I know. I can't imagine how busy you are. So I'll definitely be in touch, and I really appreciate you taking time, dude.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me on.
You have a great day. All right, Bryan Driskell from the Irish Breakdown. Nice job by Scotty Swingler. Hooking us up with a big guest on a big day. We'll step aside and come back. I got some thoughts on exactly what is going on with Baker Mayfield. I've got the secret to his success. I'll tell you about it when we come back.